Hey everybody, so today's video is going to be a little bit shorter than usual, and that's because today is Good Friday. Now, if you're a Christian, you're probably aware of what that is, but if you aren't, or you are a Christian who doesn't observe it, so wouldn't be aware of what that is, I'll just go ahead and briefly explain it to you. Good Friday is the most solemn day on the Catholic liturgical calendar and on the liturgical calendar of several other Christian groups, because it is the day that we commemorate the crucifixion of Christ. In fact, in tradition, it is the day that Christ was crucified. And so we are very solemn on that day. We go in for Mass, and the readings are Isaiah 53. You know what that is, the suffering servant prophecy, Psalm 22, that psalm that goes, my God, why have you forsaken me? And also a significant portion of the Gospel of John that details the actual suffering of Christ himself. And all of that is meant to make us reflect on the crucifixion and what it was for. We're meant to reflect on the fact that Christ suffered, and a great deal, by the way. I have a video on this that you can go watch. I'll leave it in the description if you're interested. It's called Christ Suffering in Perspective, and I made it last year to go over from a sort of like medical perspective, I suppose we could call it that, of what would happen to somebody's body if they went through all the things that it says Christ went through in the Gospels. And suffice to say that nobody is going to endure that willingly. And so the fact that Christ did do it willingly in order to redeem the human race is something that should give people pause and give people something to think about. And in service of that, in service of providing something to reflect over on Good Friday, I want to share a message that is frequently preached to us, and by us I mean me and the people who attend my parish, who attend the Good Friday liturgy. This is a message that gets shared to us every year. I remember it being 2022 or 2023 when I was thinking about religion, but didn't really know what I was going to do or how to even approach anything. And I remember hearing this, and I remember it actually resonating with me and giving me reason to actually investigate Christianity. And so I'd like to share that with all of you. And it's very simple and it's very brief. So after the priest does his readings and does what he's supposed to do in the liturgy leading up to that point, he does the homily, and then he begins to preach. Now, I remember this message being framed in the context of depression in adolescence, and so I think he was trying to connect the liturgy and the events that we're supposed to meditate on to that particular topic. And so I remember him saying something to the effect of, if you have a depressed teen, he's speaking to parents, you have to keep this in mind, then it should be made clear that Christ would have gone through all that he went through, and keep in mind, we're all well aware of what he went through. He would have gone through all of that for just one person. I think the exact words that he used were, if you were the only person that needed this kind of sacrifice made for them, if you were the only sinner in this world, Christ would have still done it for you, because his love for you is to that extent and beyond that. He would have been pierced with nails, had thorns embedded in his skull, been forced to carry a cross, already weakened from a severe beating. He would have done that all for, and ultimately died for you, if you were the only person who needed it. Now, context aside, I think that the general message of what he's saying, that Christ would have done it if you were the only sinner that needed it, is not only powerful, but it also, upon further inspection, found that it was theologically sound. Christ indeed would have done that for you if you were the only person who needed it, because such is the nature of Christ. And because he is God, that is God's nature. God's attributes include love, and he would certainly do that for me and for you and for anyone if they were the only person that needed it. And I don't think that's something that we should take for granted. I don't think it's something that, and what I mean by that is not that it's not something that would happen, because I just spent the last minute or so explaining that it would happen, but I don't think that we should take it for granted in the sense that we should ignore it or pay it no mind, especially we as Christians, because it is something that matters. It is something that we should pay attention to so that we can understand the magnitude of what Christ is willing to do for us, and realize that we don't do anything for him in return. And it's not that he needs us to do anything for him in return, but that we should. We should contemplate this truth, and we should, pay it mind and respond accordingly. Whether it's for us Christians actually being committed to walk with him, as to use the evangelical term, because I'm mainly here in evangelical circles, to walk with him, to actually increase our devotion, to live out our faith. If we're Christians, this should serve as some kind of wake-up call for us. That's what we need to do, because Christ was crucified for our sake. And if you're not Christian, then I hope that it will make you think. It'll be cause for contemplation. Because I know that it was for me. When I heard it, and when I actually was paying attention to the liturgy and wasn't just like, a child who didn't know what was going on, because I grew up with this stuff. But growing up, you're a child, you don't really pay attention, you don't really, quite frankly, care that much. You just kind of want to do what your parents told you to and then go home. But when you're old enough to actually think about it, it actually resonates with you. And so I hope that if you're a non-Christian, that it gives you something to think about, that Christ would do this, because no one disputes that Christ was alive, and generally speaking, no one disputes most of the details of the Gospels related to the Passion and the crucifixion and the like. That is indeed how people were crucified. They were flogged, and they were forced to carry their crosses, and they were, graphically crucified, and then there would be a death blow, and in this case there was a spear through the side, but sometimes it'd be a lot worse. This is indeed something that is historical, and Christ, if he is who he says he is, and that is going to require investigation on your part, but I'm saying that he is who he says he is, he would have done that for only you, if you were the only person who needed it. And I want to leave that off for the non-Christians, but I do want to address just one last point, and I apologize, this is not as structured as some of my other videos, where like my last video on pro-life arguments, because this is Good Friday after all, and I do have obligations to tend to, and I'm just kind of doing this in one take. But the last point that I want to hit for Christians especially is that we can all get lost in abstractions, right? Where we say, oh, well, Christ, obviously he did this for everybody, but because you're focusing on the universal aspect, you kind of forget the individual aspect, and so you kind of lose sight of the individual aspect and just kind of think, oh, well, Christ did that for everybody, so I can just kind of go do whatever I want. And that's a spiritually dangerous and harmful mindset to get into, but it's something that well-meaning Christians sometimes stumble into by complete accident. And so I hope that meditating on the idea that, hey, Christ will do this for you too, and he did it for you just as much as he did it for everybody else individually. I hope that thinking about that will actually give you cause to, like I said, keep Christ in mind, live in his ways, do as he commanded, because he certainly merits you doing what he commanded. And with that being said, everybody, that is the reflection of Good Friday that I want to leave you on. That Christ would do this for all of you, and for you only, if you were the only person who required it. But also the inverse of that, something that you can't forget, and that I haven't brought up thus far, is that we kind of all had a hand in some way in crucifying Christ. That's something that we also need to think about, because it's all fine and nice sounding to think about how Christ will do this for all of us, and it's true, but also he did it for a reason. We are all sinners who don't deserve anything that he did, and we all had a hand in bringing him to that point. And so that's something that we also should think about. Yes, he would do it for all of us, and he did it for everybody individually, but we kind of had a hand in that, and that's something that should bring us great sorrow, and something that we should also contemplate, because today is the day for contemplating such things. Now, with that being said, everybody, that is the last point that I want to touch on. And if this reached you in some way and you found some kind of use in it, I would appreciate it if you left a like and left a comment, just saying that this is actually reaching people, and this is actually a message that is worth spreading. And if you enjoy content like this, where we reflect on theology and we reflect on philosophy, because I made a pro-life video, this is the last video that I made, then I would also appreciate it if you subscribe and turn on the notifications, because the subs box is kind of worthless. People don't really look at it anymore, and so notification is the best way to be notified of content like this. And with all of that being said, everybody, I will see you guys in the next one. God bless.